to the next installment of This Week in the NFL. I'm Kendall Capps.
And I'm Andrew Williamson.
Well, it's week 14, and it's almost playoff time, and there are a few key matchups this weekend that we're going to give you a little bit of insight toward. We're going to begin with the undefeated Saints going on the road to the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC South matchup. What do you see?
I think it's a big game. The Falcons played the Saints very close in New Orleans earlier this year, but the Falcons are injured. No Matt Ryan, no Michael Turner, both big question marks for the game. I don't see the Falcons pulling it out without those guys. Now, if they play, I think Atlanta has a team and they play well. They have a team that's built to beat the Saints, and could hand them the first loss. But without those two guys, I really don't see it happening.
Yeah, both of them are listed as questionable right now. The coach of the Falcons said, don't count Matt Ryan out earlier this afternoon, but that doesn't sound too positive. And even if you do get them to play, you need them not only to play, but to play really well. They're horrible against the pass, ranked 29th in the NFL. And the Saints know how to throw the ball. So it's going to be really tough for the Falcons to pull that one out.
Well, and I think coming down the stretch now, you start to look at which teams are playing for the playoffs and which teams may be packing it in. I mean, Atlanta really struggling on the playoff life support right now. So we'll see if they come to play or if they're starting to look towards next.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly is a must-win. They pretty much have to win out if they want to get a wild card berth. 8-4 is that benchmark right now of wild card teams, and they're 2 games back. However, their schedule is a little too tough. This game is going to end their season, I think.
Yeah. Well, and that takes us to the other undefeated team in the NFL at 12-0. The Indianapolis Colts hosting the Denver Broncos. What do you see going on here?
Well, typically, ever since Peyton Manning has gotten to Indianapolis, Denver has been his whipping boy. They've beaten up pretty badly in some matchups. In one of the playoff games, it's somewhere around 63-7. There was a few really poor scores in there. However, this Denver team is built a little bit differently. They can run the ball with Knowshon Moreno and Correll Buckhalter. Indy is a little bit susceptible to the running game, giving up 111 yards a game. And they have a pretty strong secondary that has turned it around after that midseason swoon. Between Dawkins, Law, and Bailey, they might be able to slow down those inexperienced young Indy receivers. However, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference in the end.
I agree. I think Denver is a more suited team with their current coach and roster to play Indy than they have been in the past. But a close game, I think, favors the Colts, and a shootout favor. I don't see a lot of ways that Denver can pull this out. I mean, that defense, the one thing that has proven to really slow them down this year has been the no huddle.
Yeah.
And teams that keep their defense on the field and go no huddle really pose problems for them. We know nobody does that better than Peyton Manning.
Yes.
They could keep this Denver defense on the field all day long, and then those old guys start to get tired, start to get run down, and Pierre Garçon's down the field. So I like the Colts. Maybe big, it may be close, but I think they clinch the top seed.
Yeah, I think so. And when you really think about it, I would have the same analysis of this game had it been played in Denver, and I would still pick Indy then. So Indy's playing at home. How can you go against them?
And this is the last game really where Indy has anything to play for. If they win this game, everything's wrapped up. So we'll see if they're resting players and how things work.
And what they do from there. Now we're going to go to an interconference matchup. The Cincinnati Bengals sitting at 9-3 are going to travel to the Minnesota Vikings, who are standing at 10-2. What do you see happening there?
Minnesota looked really bad to me in that Arizona game. We looked at their schedule. Their schedule's very weak. They've beaten up on a lot of soft teams, especially at home. They've pulled out a lot of lucky wins, close wins against the 49ers and the Ravens. Yeah. And Cincinnati is playing very well. I don't know if their offense has the firepower to put up enough points in Minnesota. But I think a key is going to be whether or not Brett Favre continues his December ways of last year and last week by throwing interceptions and short-arming balls. Is he starting to get tired and run down at the end of the season?
Yeah.
Or will he go back and play like he has so far this year and carry them into the playoffs?
Well, I think for this game, Cincinnati, they're 4-1 on the road, so they played really well on the road this year. Cedric Benson looked really healthy after missing a couple games. They have depth at running back. The newly signed Larry Johnson has played well since he got there. Scott even played well when he had to fill in for one game. And this Cincinnati team is eerily similar to that San Francisco team. They run the ball well. They can stop the run. They have a solid secondary. And they can actually pass the ball pretty well with Carson Palmer and a couple of receivers, Ocho Cinco. And San Fran didn't have that ability. I think I have a weird feeling that Cincinnati's going to go in and steal one in Minnesota. You would think that Minnesota, they're going to rebound. They realize they lost that big game in Arizona. But something tells me this might linger a little bit. And Brett Favre, like you said, down the stretch in his career the last few years, he struggled in December, and that very well might continue again this week.
And not just there, but the injuries starting to pile up elsewhere for the Vikings.
Yes,
too.
yeah, and that makes a big difference.
Let's head down to Florida for a big AFC wildcard matchup here. Miami at Jacksonville. The winner would be sitting in the 6th playoff seed at the end of the week. Who do you like here?
You know, it's almost a matchup of mirror teams in a way. Both teams run the ball really well. Neither team can stop it all too well. Neither team can pass the ball too well. However, I think in practice all week long, both teams are going to try to focus on slowing down the run. I think Ricky and MJD might be held in check. And the difference is going to be which quarterback steps up and makes the plays down the field. And I think last week gave Chad Henne a lot of confidence going against, granted, a weak secondary in New England, but he lit them up for 335 and a few scores. I think that's going to help him. And don't forget, he played at a wide open offense in Michigan. So it's not like he's never done this before. So if he needs to open it up, he has the past experience. So I actually think Miami, in what you could call a road game maybe, pulls out a big win.
I agree. And as you said with the road game, there may be more Dolphins fans at this Jacksonville Stadium than there are Jaguars fans. But I agree. I think the Dolphins, while these teams look very similar, the Jaguars really haven't played anyone yet this year.
Yeah.
And the Dolphins have been tested against the Patriots, the Colts, the Saints, the Chargers. They've played the top teams in the NFL. And I think now we're going to start to sort out, and I think Miami comes in and takes this game. And the Jaguars, I look to drop, I think their next 3 games, they play the Dolphins, the Colts, the Patriots, and I think Jacksonville's going to be sitting on the outside, where they belong.
Where they belong, yes, absolutely. Yeah, their schedule down the stretch is really difficult. It's going to be hard for them to find a way in. Now we're going to go to another interconference matchup. The surprisingly 7-win-in-a-row San Diego Chargers going on the road to take on the Dallas Cowboys. Pretty good matchup. You've got strength against strength. Dallas' defense against San Diego's offense. What do you think might happen there?
You know, this is a matchup of 2 teams who I think are much worse than their record says. I know San Diego's passing offense has looked great, but they can't run the ball. Their defense doesn't impress me, and they beat a lot of bad teams on their way to these 7 wins. Dallas, the same way. I mean, they played well enough where they should have won against the Giants, and they found ways to lose, but they just don't. I almost don't know who to pick. I'm going to take the Chargers, and I think Dallas is going to be going into one of their classic December slides here as it looked last week. I'm not going to bet on them at this point. And San Diego, I do think will probably win 3 or 4 of these last 4 games, but I think we'll be earlier out in the playoffs than a lot of people suspect.
You know, I think you hit on something that neither of these teams are as good as their record indicates. San Diego, during that 7-game stretch, has beaten Kansas City twice, Cleveland, and Oakland. And then they had a come-from-behind late victory against the Giants. They scored a touchdown with like 30 seconds left to win that game. I don't think they're quite as good. Now, yes, they don't run the ball well. They run it in the red zone well, though. LT, he passed, I think, Jim Brown last week for rushing yards all time. He's getting into the end zone. And I think their passing game opens up that running game a little bit when they get near. But in this game, Dallas at home has been really stout against the run. I think they're going to completely shut down that San Diego rushing game. I'd be surprised if they run the ball for more than 30 yards this game. And I think they're going to put it completely on the shoulders of Rivers. And even though I like that San Diego passing attack, I think Dallas, with everyone calling out Wade Phillips this past week and the players today, they stood up and they spoke out in defense of their head coach. And I believe that the team is unified after last week because they know they should have beat the Giants. I picked them to win this week in a very tight ball game.
All right, well, taking us to the last game of the week, big Sunday night NFC battle, the Eagles and the Giants. The Giants lose this game, they may be going home.
Yeah, the Giants are sitting at 7-6, a game behind both Philly and Green Bay for the wild card. They lose this, they're pretty much done for the season. Or 7-5, excuse me. But this is almost a must-win, just like it was last week. It's in the NFC East. It's going to be a key game. But their secondary, even though they're getting a little bit healthier, they still give up a lot of yards, a lot of big plays. And I think Philly is going to expose that and throw the ball downfield. Deshaun Jackson might be back. If he's back, they're really explosive and hard to stop.
I agree. I know the Giants ended their skid against Dallas, but They couldn't have looked worse doing it. And I do think Philly, of the teams in the NFC East, is the only legit team that will come out.
I think that's the only team that could win a playoff game. This is
well,
the
they
Giants
play each other in a playoff.
They very well might. They very well might. But I don't think this is the same Giants team that won that Super Bowl a couple of years ago with that great defensive line. This year, they're not putting pressure on the quarterback. They're not protecting Eli Manning. He still has foot injuries. I don't care what you say. He's been inconsistent the last 8 weeks since he had the foot injury. And I think it's going to end up costing the Giants down the stretch.
Things are going south in New York right now.
Well, that's going to do it for Week 14 of This Week in the NFL. If you'd like to see the rest of our picks, you can log on to AmericanSportsDaily.blogspot.com, and we will see you next week.
Take care.